Reddit. At what moment in your life did you stop, chuckle, and think to yourself, I'm in danger? Story 1. When I was 7, I was playfully pushing a sheep and he pushed forward. Next thing I know, I'm against a wall. Sheep head on my chest, and 5 seconds later, I realize he is too strong for me. I literally thought I was going to die right there. Story 2. I swam from a beach out to a buoy. Not even that far, maybe 200 m from the beach. I am a strong swimmer, so thought I'd manage it easily. Something about the cold water and current, I was really struggling coming back, even with trying to swim horizontal to the beach, etc. Went all lightheaded and felt really tired. Then just started thinking that this was it, I was going to drown and how stupid it was of me. Floated there for a bit, laughed to myself like a maniac about how stupid I was dying like this. Eventually snapped out of it and started swimming again, ended up crawling back onto the beach. My partner asked how the sea was, and I just croaked fine. Story 3. At my best friend's going away party. Drunker than I've ever been before or since, barely able to stand. When the brothers collectively decided to pick me up and throw me in the pool, all I could do was grab a nearby screen door with one white-knuckled hand. Host is a big burly musclehead who'd just made sergeant. Stopped them and told them they were idiots. I was too drunk to swim, then I blacked out. Story 4. Me and my good friend Felix, both German, were traveling with an interrail ticket through Europe. In Serbia we were in a train which was going really slow and stopping at every really little town village. For some reason the train got shorter and shorter every other station because they were uncoupling a wagon here and there. So everyone moved to the first 2 wagons because they were most likely to arrive at the final destination. Me and Felix have already been in the first wagon in a closed cabin where there's a bench on the left and the right. We were both sitting left having a cigarette when suddenly things went intense. 3 obviously drunken men came in that cabin. At first they only asked for a cigarette, which we gave them, but after a few minutes they started discussing more and more intense. I could feel that they were talking about us, so I asked Felix, whose father is Serbian, he would understand them. He was pretty serious at that moment and told me that 2 of them wanted to rob us now and 1 wanted to wait until after the train ride. Felix gave me continuous updates about what they were talking. They were guessing how much money we might have and still discussing when to do the robbery. Their discussion heated up at one point and then stopped completely. I was wondering what happened, and then suddenly it went all black. We were in a tunnel. I was totally flexed and expected to get the beaten out of me. They were only talking like 3 sentences. I asked Felix, are they going to do it now? He said I'm not sure. After what felt like 10 but probably was 2 minutes, the light came back and I was sitting there like Jackie Chan on my bench, prepared to fight back in the dark. They knew now that we kind of knew. They decided to follow us at our destination, so we could kind of chill during the ride. At our destination we just sprinted into the next taxi and told him to go to the next city as fast as possible. Story 5. About 19k feet 7 kilometers up in Tanzania. Felt incredibly drowsy while taking a rest and started dreaming. Guide slapped me on the arm. Don't sleep, you die. The chuckle and I'm in danger came when I realized I felt so awful I might choose sleep. Story 6. When I decided to explore some lava tubes on an extinct volcano Rangitoto. If you're curious, with no torch and bad footwear. It was extremely dark in there with no cell phone reception. I got completely disoriented and had to feel my way out because my phone was not as bright as I'd thought. No one knew where I was and I could have been in serious trouble. Stupidest thing I've done recently. Story 7. A crackhead got out of prison and went to visit his girlfriend. She moved out about 2 years earlier, and I moved in. So at 1 a.m. there's a clearly drunk and high nut job trying to break down my front door while my wife and kids are asleep somehow. I hadn't put the bolts on the door yet as I was only just on my way to bed when he turned up. It was kind of funny, but I still got the cricket bat out just in case. Spelling. Story 8. Calling an Uber in Houston right in the middle of a downpour. As a Brit who was staying there for work, I was only vaguely aware of the dangers of flash flooding, and being from a country with no real inclement weather, I obviously didn't take it as seriously as I should have. As Texas natives will no doubt confirm, when it rains hard. At least it did that morning. I remember trying to call an Uber on the app, and a few drivers in a row canceled on me, but I was going home from a friend's house, so I didn't really have much choice and just persisted in requesting a driver. The driver who eventually did show up was a friendly Nigerian fellow who probably also didn't really consider how dangerous it was. In the short as in, for second journey from the front door to the cab, I got so soaked it looked like I had been thrown in a lake. We were both chuckling like haha, look at all this rain, until it got so bad that we literally couldn't see 1 yard in front of the car. By this point we were on the freeway and basically trapped. And then we both started getting alerts on the Uber app that we were in a danger zone and to vacate immediately. Then we saw the water rising on the side of the freeway, and cars starting to lose control. That's when both of our smiles dropped, and it was like, yeah, people die in these conditions. We both might not be going home today. It probably sounds silly to people who have to deal with that all the time, but that was the only time in my life I have experienced the genuine fear of there's a very real danger that I could either drown, or be sleeping in a community center this evening. Eventually, he did get me home and I've never been so grateful. He got a pretty big tip from me. And a hug. Edit for those wondering, this wasn't Hurricane Harvey. This was the really bad flooding in April-May 2016. Not even sure it had a name. I know a few people died, including a woman who tried to get out of her stranded car on the freeway and drowned. A few friends of mine also said it's not unheard of for alligators and snakes to wash up in your backyard. Edit, I didn't necessarily want to go into this, in case you thought I was trying to present myself as some kind of suave Casanova, but since several of you are asking, the friend I was staying with was a woman, and I was doing the walk of shame. She did offer me to stay and wait it out at her place. But the rain wasn't too bad at that point, and only really became dangerous midway through my journey home. It really did come out of nowhere, and she couldn't have known. In any case, it would have been beyond awkward to hang around the whole day with someone I literally just met 12 hours previously. I would have swam home through gator-infested waters if I had to. Edit, yes. The Uber driver was fine. I asked him if he wanted to come in and wait it out, but he was heading home to his wife and kids. He lived very close to where I was staying, so dropping me off was on his route home. Probably why he was the only driver to pick me up. I gave him a generous tip, 5 stars and a hug. Story 9. Me and my friend were scaling a cliff. He wanted to go around, which would take about an hour. I said we could climb it. Fast forward 10 minutes and I'm hanging off a cliff 30 feet tall and hanging on to dear life with 2 hands. I found the situation quite funny. I was so confident in my ability to climb it, and I lost my footing just as I got to the top. I was holding onto the rock for what felt like forever, most likely less than 2 minutes, until he managed to climb up and pull me up there. Edit, thanks for the upvotes. This was one of my first comments and I wasn't expecting this much attention. You guys are awesome. Story 10. When I was in school and did my psych rotation, the first thing we were told was never to split up from our partner, so just in case of a dangerous situation with a patient, we would have a second person there to help. I went to do an assessment on a patient. He seemed perfectly normal, and my partner judged that now would be a good time to use the restroom. The patient and I are having a pleasant as can be conversation. He asks me to look at his drawings, which he hung up proudly on the wall. I oblige. I like art as much as the next gal. I look, they're plenty nice, and then I turn around and find that the second thing we were told never to do, which is to let the patient get between us and the doorway, has happened, and he was not seeming so friendly anymore, which is when I thought to myself, well, darn it, I'm in a pickle now. This man is telling me how he has to get out of here, I have to help him, and all of I don't even hear what at this point, because I'm realizing how potentially I am, but then I realized that I had also done the third thing which we were told never to do, which was to keep our cell phones on us on the floor. I was just hoping at this point that I could keep this guy talking a little while I call my preceptor to save my dumb. My friend was at the same clinical site the following semester, and the preceptor used that as a cautionary tale to emphasize the first 2 rules and get rid of the third one. Story 11. I leaned over a candle and set my t-shirt on fire. I thought it was really interesting and turned to my friend saying, hey, look everyone, my t-shirt's on fire. Fortunately, one of them had more presence of mind than I did and put it out. Story 12. I worked as an animator in a hotel. During the season, the mini club daycare is filled with kids, but post-season there is not even one kid in the hotel. So post-season, 1 older lady and 1 middle-aged guy enter the empty daycare. The lady quickly explained to me that this guy is her mentally disabled son, who is mentally around 3 to 4 years old. He saw the daycare and really wanted to play there. Usually I wouldn't accept, but there were no kids around, so I was actually happy that he'll be occupied for a while. He was really endearing, and we often watched Mickey Mouse DVDs since he was a big fan. After a few days of me hanging out with him, his mother came to pick him up and asking me how was he. I replied that he was nice as always, to which she replied good, because he can get very violent and aggressive sometimes. It sent chills down my spine realizing that I was lucky, but that also he'll be coming to the mini club for the rest of their vacation. So there I was, day after day playing with this dude big as twice as me, completely alone, doing everything he wanted and being more than careful just that he doesn't get mad. Story 13. A homeless girl grabbed me from a bar and said she needed an ambulance because her friend had owed. I followed her and started phoning one. She led me into an abandoned building. All that was going through my mind was someone needs help when she led me to some stairs and said we need to go up them. My brain finally kicked in and realized it could easily be a trap. Even if it wasn't, I was about to walk into a crack den and was far enough into the building where escape wasn't easy. Luckily my friend had followed us in and appeared, so I phoned the ambulance and we left. Story 14. One night when I was in active addiction, I was drinking heavily and also taking a hefty dose of oxycodone. I felt my heart slow down to a crawl and I was having a lot of trouble breathing. Very easily could have died there, but I found it partly comedic in the moment. Don't do drugs, kids. Story 15. When a car jumped the median and was barreling right towards me doing well over 70. Luckily horsepower saved me from death. My first instinct was to floor it, at least have them hit the rear door panels instead of the driver's side door. I was only one in the car. Story 16. I was doing aid work in Croatia in the late 90s, only a few years after the war had ended. Our group was staying in a small village about an hour outside Zagreb, which had been caught up in the conflict. Lots of shelled houses, mines in the countryside. Even the main bridge had been blown up, so residents had used an army makeshift bridge if they wanted to cross the river. We had made friends with the locals and they took us down to the river where we had a fun time swimming and mucking about. I totally underestimated the river current and my ability to swim, so I start trying to cross the river and the current just picks me up, whoosh, and suddenly I'm on my, trying to swim against it, no deal. When I realized this, I started trying to get footing, but in being swept downstream and my feet are literally hitting rocks, no grip at all. It seemed like forever, but was probably about 5 to 10 seconds. I hit a shallow calm patch of the river where I could stand up. When the guys came over, they were telling me it was no big deal, but had I been swept a little bit further downstream, I would have hit a heavily mined area and probably been blown to bits. I metaphorically myself, that's the closest I've come to losing my life. Really me up. Story 17. We were on a patrol in Afghanistan in 2008 when we came under heavy fire. Our fire team took cover behind a low loose stone mud wall, unable to return any effective suppressing fire. The wall was slowly getting lower and smaller as it was peppered by small arms fire. We knew that air support was coming, but it felt like we were in some shitty Indiana Jones scene. In those situations, it's the humor that stops you from shitting yourself. Story 18. I told the story before related to some army threads, but it was 3 years ago I believe when I was still in active service in Switzerland, in part of a tank crew. That day I was the designated loader for the cannon. We were doing live fire exercises and as we fired, one of the gas extractor seals blew up. What this is basically is a circular rubber ring around the gas tube of the cannon. If you look up a Leopard A2 tank, it's the thick tube at the base of the cannon that acts as a seal to prevent smoke backlash into the crew compartment, and instead vents it outside. This entailed the sealed crew compartment to fill up with smoke and the acrid smell of cordite and essentially blind us all. So here I am, a 25 kilograms high-EX shell in my arms that you don't want to drop on the floor, blinded and winded by smoke, thinking well, this is how I die apparently. Managed to fumble around, slot the shell back into the carry tray as well as engage the coax machine gun fan. It's mounted under the machine gun ejection port, and pulls the smoke outwards when turned on and open the top hatch to let it cycle out. Fun times. Edit. It was a high-EX shell, not an AP. The AP shells are 20 kilograms. Story 19. There was this time on a school bus. We had a new driver. The area is pretty hilly, and in this route, had this steep 50 drop-off where the bus turned around with a 3-point turn, but the bus driver kept backing up closer and closer. We almost went to the cliff. I'm sure that if we measured, it was within a foot. I started looking at exits, how fast I could run to the front or the side exit. Man, we were all screaming in terror. Good times. Edit. Spelling and the fact the back of the bus was hanging over the cliff and the wheels of the bus were close to the edge. Story 20. Hunted wild boar razorbacks in Australia. Since I was a teenager 14 they wouldn't give me a rifle. They set a line of the teenagers up with long poles and what looked like metal trash can lids to bang and make noise in a line abreast formation. We stomp forward. Pigs run the other way toward the hunters with the rifles in theory. Occasionally, a male, the ones with the horns, will have enough testosterone stored in their sacks to charge at us. That's when we're supposed to take the pole and push them away. Yeah, 14-year-old me dressed in a leather apron is gonna push this 400 pounds pissed off monster off me with a stick. Story 21. Brown man here. Took a trip to Big Bend National Park a few years ago with a bunchweed. Got to my campsite in view of the Rio Grande, high AF, and realized that I am on federal land on the US-Mexico border with a not insubstantial quantity of scheduled substance. I've made a huge mistake. Story 22. When I was called in at 1 a.m. to deal with a drunk client, I worked in drug addiction. The police told me, girl half their size, that she was placed on a 96-hour hold and had been masked because she was biting and spiting. Okay, whatever, not the first time I'm dealing with this. I have to have her sign paperwork and she's bled all over. Whatever, I mask and glove up because blood is gross. And I'm not stupid. She's screaming and spitting into this mask when big cop has to leave to answer another call. The smaller cop, still bigger than me, says that he's sorry for all the trouble and blah blah. Small talk as we wait for her latest screaming match to end. She jumps up out of her chair and lunges at me. I laugh out of terror and surprise because this drunk, masked, handcuffed, hobbled woman just lunged at me. She bites her tongue when she misses me and smashes her face into the table. Whatever, again I'm trained to deal with this. That sobered her up so she's calm, but blood is streaming behind the mask. This new B-cop takes the mask off of this spiting person. ASIM reading that she's HI. I was on the last page of this packet of information on the client and why she's being held on A96HH. And no one told me or him. The other cop knew and said nothing. Luckily, she was pretty sober and chill and apologized. I had to sterilize an entire building floor because of the blood by myself, at 1 a.m., laughing like a crazy person because no one knows all about telling other people that someone who is actively spitting after biting themselves to the point of drawing blood that they're HIV, either that or the time a client kidnapped me, whichever. Edit. Well, I'm sorry for not telling the kidnapping story first. A quick notice. I realized that all blood should be treated as HIV and I handled the situation as I was half-trained to do. She was masked and handcuffed and hobbled. I gloved up and put on a scrub top with buttons on the back in case blood came in contact with my clothing. It covers you from neck down, so whatever. I cleaned the blood with the HIV blood cleaner stuff we had in every room and used on everything, but I was getting off work from the longest shift of my life because we were short-staffed. On 96-hour hold paperwork, known medical conditions is on the first page in case they have something that might react with a drug they're abusing, blood pressure meds, and drinking since noon. I don't want them here, they go to the hospital. It was blank because the cop already knew she had HIV and I guess assumed we knew too since she was a frequent flyer a few years back. The new cop and I were both new. I asked the older cop if there were any medical conditions and he said no, that she's just a mean drunk and bleeding. I up by sitting down at the table she was hobbled at in an attempt to get her to sign the paperwork. My mistake. Anyways, kidnapping time that wasn't even really a kidnapping according to my work, but I was scared and stuff happened, so I'll call it what I want. There was this client I had to work with. He had a history of abusing women, being really degrading towards them, and a crime record that reflected as much. I wasn't allowed to meet with him with the door closed unless my mail office mate fake wall was in his office too, whatever. He's making great progress with a beautiful blonde counselor and pretty much hates me because I have to update his failed UA tests. So, After doing outpatient for about a month he calls in saying he's suicidal and he wants his treatment team to come with him to the ER. It's Friday afternoon, about 4:30 p.m. and we get off at 5. Counselor Chick says we have to go and be there for support, that he's made a lot of progress with her and that him asking for help is a great sign. I agree but I'm not going alone. My supervisor insists I go and that the counselor will meet me in the parking lot. She'll follow right behind me. I go outside and the counselor comes up and says she can't go because she has family in town and huge family dinner at 5. She says he's perfectly fine and he'll only be there for a little bit before he's admitted. That I know, I'm the one who researched his background. I'm not doing it, my boss makes me go. Says he'll be at the hospital already and I won't be there alone since it's a hospital. I'm on call this weekend, I have to go, you people fine. So I get there and he's waiting for me in the parking lot. He asks where the counselor is and I say she can't make it. Okay, he's annoyed because we're a team but we go in. He tells them he's in pain and suicidal. They have heard this story from this client a million times because he's med-seeking. He asks for medication by name, says he needs in this amount, blah blah. I tell him he's med-seeking and that if he is suicidal he needs to talk about that. He said he wants to die because of the pain in his back but he wants to live because living is good or some. So, an hour later and we're being discharged with a prescription for OTC pain meds. He's pissed. I tell him I'll see him next week and he says he needs a ride home. No, not happening. I call Medicaid transport and get that set up and get in my car. They cancel the ride because it's not an emergency and my facility is providing care so I have to take him. Text supervisor what happened and she never responds. Okay, he lives about 10 minutes from the hospital but I don't know where. He gets in the car and tosses his backpack on the floor, turning his body towards me to give me directions to his house. Turns out, he's going to his mom's house that's right outside of town. Only about 5 minutes. Okay, I know how to get to the road but don't know where to go from there. It's a one-way dirt road with no houses except his at the end. About 2 minutes out of town he pulls a knife out. I look at him, the knife, and ask what he's doing. He said he wanted the hospital band off so he cuts it off. He starts playing with the knife, turning in the seat more to face me, and talking about how lonely he is out here. There's no one home. He should have someone keep him company this weekend because it's so quiet and no one hears him when he screams. No one hears anything because there is no one to hear. I laugh this. I tell him I'd stay but I have a boyfriend and a dog and 2 cats to feed and it's late but he'll come by tomorrow to check on him. He said nights are the worst and he needs someone. He needs a girl at night. Well, we're at his house by now and I ask him to get out. He said no. He pointed the knife towards me and told me to get out. Not happening. I comment on the dog and how I'm not getting out with a dog there because I'm scared. Total lie. I love dogs so he says he'll tie the dog up when I get out. I ask him to do it first so I feel more safe with the dog. He says the dog is fine and he's nice, won't bite me or anything. I make a cute smile, laugh thing and comment that I'm bad luck and knowing me the dog would bite me. He kinda pokes me with the knife a bit in the ribs and says to get out. I refuse. I ask him when his mom will be back and he says soon. I should meet her. Deal, I'll meet your mom and your dog, just tie the dog up first. So he opens the door and puts a foot out. The dog is already tied up on a long chain. I ask for a shorter one so the dog doesn't scratch my car. He gets out but the door is open and he's holding it, standing between the car and the door. He steps back a bit to get a better grip on the dog in his left hand and the knife door in his right. He has to let go of the door to grab his backpack so he does since I remind him to not forget it. Distraction I guess, and he slings it over his shoulder and steps back to grab the shorter leash from a tree for the dog. He has to step away from the door about 12 inches to get the leash but he's still pointing the knife at me. I slam the door shut and reverse out of there. Not a real kidnapping, see? I call my best friend and scream and cry on the way home scared out of my mind. I have to go back to work to type the document and almost punch a coworker in the face because he hears me crying. I go home and scream and cry outside my house as my boyfriend and dog comfort me. I scream and cry all weekend. I go into work on Monday and am written up for not contacting my supervisor at the time of the incident, that I should have called her as he pulled the knife out. My phone was in my purse beside me. Anytime I moved he moved the knife. I should have told her afterwards that I was safe. She never once called T.O. check on me knowing where I had T.O. go by myself. They issued a 96-hour hold on him that Monday. I came to work on Tuesday and was forced to work with him in the building because he needed mental help. No one checked him correctly upon intake and hour 28 they found that same knife in his pocket. He said he missed me. I screamed and went home. Worked there for another 5 years. I live in Korea now. TLDR scary guy girl who has to go with him this amount. Got in trouble for getting out. Was watching Archer on my laptop in college. Had my headphones on and in the episode there was an alarm going off. After about 3 episodes I finally realized, hey wait, why can I still hear the alarm? I look up and just see the end of the corridor I was in completely engulfed in fire and it was coming at me fast. Best part was like 40 people just walked by me after the alarm started and let me sit there. Nobody even bothered to warn me. Story 23. I took an out-of-bounds ski trail that looked fun by myself. Because intelligence is my strong suit. Came upon a tall cliff with a flat landing that I knew I couldn't make on skis but I had come too far to hike back to the main path. Took my skis off, tossed them over and climbed down. Hurt my legs, but nothing serious, continued on. Several minutes later came upon a sign pointing towards a 20 kilometers bike trail ending God knows where. It was around that time I realized I could end up lost in the back country of a ski resort with no cell reception. Decided to hike in the opposite direction the sign was pointing since it was uphill and seemed more likely to take me back to the main trail. After several whispered swears and a good half hour of hiking uphill and across a sketchy-looking wooden bridge through deep snow in ski boots holding my skis, I arrived at a populated ski run. I now make sure to have someone with me for all backcountry-related adventures. That way if I die, I can bring them down with me. Story 24. That moment when you're gunning it up a hill on an ATV and you're about 90 degrees before the pinnacle and you let off the gas too early. You thought you were gonna flip backwards and everything perpetually slows and then goes completely still before the hill crest and it's quiet and you know Newton's law, so you just chuckle and think, well, I guess we're gonna roll backwards now and hope for the best. Story 25 was on a school trip to Austria skiing. Guy who didn't like me and repeatedly picked on me came into my room with all his mates and pushed me to a window. I thought it was just a joke until he put a knife to my throat. I instantly stopped laughing. He stared at me for a good 30 seconds and walked out of my room, which didn't have a lock on the door. Didn't sleep that night. Story 26. I took a lift from a stranger on a very hot day. As repayment, he requested a handjob. I laughed, got out the car, and walked away. It could have gone horribly wrong, but having just come out of hospital for an attempted suicide, I honestly didn't care about my safety. Story 27. My SIL has a cousin with a drinking problem that I did not know of. Well, drunk cousin picked SIL and I up to hang out, and she was drunk, which I didn't notice at first till she started swerving, speeding and driving erratically. She then proceeded to stop by a 7-Eleven to buy more wine. Here's where I thought I was in danger. Thankfully my husband wanted me home now and had to leave ASAP. Never did that again. Sil sister-in-law. OMG guys. Story 28. I was in a play and my character had to be on top of a cheap IKEA desk, in tall stiletto heels. This desk was on top of a large arrangement of flimsy metal stage blocks. I had already fallen off the desk itself during a rehearsal with no costumes before it was put on the staging blocks and sustained a large bruise across my back from hitting the edge of it as I toppled. Opening night. Lights up. I immediately thought, well. Story 29. To put a long story short, when I was 16 I severely misinterpreted how long a hiking trail was. I discovered it a couple hours before sunset. I had never hiked it before, so I glanced at the map of the trailhead before setting off. It was essentially a loop with a slash through it, so I wasn't too worried about getting lost. I hiked it for an HR or so. I reached what I thought was the halfway point and sat for a while. When I got up, I decided to hike the rest of the loop instead of going back the way I came. Bad idea. The sun was almost down at this point and I had to start using my phone as a flashlight. Then I realized that I'm at 15. At that point the reality set in that I was a 16-year-old girl alone in the woods. No one knew where I was, and I'm about to lose my only light source. As I continue hiking the loop, I start to realize that it's much longer than I initially thought. I started to get frantic and ended up turning around. At this point my phone dies and I start thinking to myself, if something happens to me here they won't find me for days. The rest of the story is essentially just me being terrified in the woods, but I did eventually make it back to my car unscathed. Moral of the story: don't be an idiot and read the trail maps thoroughly if you're gonna go hiking right before sunset. Also charge your phone. Story 30. While I was balancing myself on a wrought iron fence post that I had impaled myself upon, for the first 30 seconds after the incident occurred I was just sitting there alone thinking, well, what do I do now? Edit fine, elaborate, but it's a long story, so give me a while. Also there's a great Billy Mays, but wait, there's more moments, so stay tuned. Edit 2. I'd like to take a moment to say that this is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I will post a picture of the fence in question and may have some other Redditor witnesses friends who were there affirm my story. Edit 3. Story is finished, but I'll post photos of the fence post later. Edit 4. Late AF, but hey, race the photo as promised. So I was at a buddy's house hanging out with high school friends when we decided to play a game of cops and robbers with airsoft guns. I know, typical dumb Midwestern teenager stuff. Anyways, I was a robber and I sure as didn't want to be riddled with airsoft bullets, so I found myself a good hiding place. Problem was I had to get over a 3-5-foot wrought iron fence post to get to said hiding place. So I'm climbing this fence when I slip and fall in between two of the metal spikes on the fence. My arms are holding onto the top bar of the fence and my leg is making a 90-degree angle, almost as if I'm stuck in the middle of a high knees exercise. And I'm thinking, alright, no problem. I'll just lift my leg up and go on my merry way, but I soon notice that there is a tumor-esque bulge in the middle of my leg. Suddenly I'm in tunnel vision when I realize in horror there was a third spike that went straight through my thigh and was poking out the other side. It was almost as if my brain was in the middle of a loading screen, slowly registering how I was at that moment. Perhaps a minute went by before I was like, yeah, maybe calling for help might not be a bad idea. So I yell out a what my friends would later describe as a feeble, pitiful help until my buddy Wildbro shows up. Wildbro initially says something along the lines of, "Oh hella swell a fella, get thee off the fence," before realizing the gravity of the situation and yelling "OH like a broken record player." This prompts the rest of the merry band to appear, who go through much of the same stages as Wildbro did until we all calm down and realize that we should do something and not just leave me on the fence for all eternity. At one point there was a vote on whether or not to pull me off of the fence, which resulted in a 5-2 vote to leave me on the fence until actual medical professionals arrived. As opposed to letting 16-year-olds perform trauma procedures, something in the back of my mind told me that that was the last thing that we should do right now, and luckily clearer heads prevailed. So 911 gets called and then Trekkie Bro's mom gets alerted to the events unfolding in her backyard. I get informed that the EMTs will arrive within the next 10 minutes and everyone is surrounding me saying everything's gonna be alright. assuring themselves as much as they're assuring me. Skater bro calls my mom to let her know that I'm in a bit of a predicament, only for her to hang up, thinking it's a prank. Meanwhile, I'm drenched in my own sweat and babbling about how I'm never gonna run again. My buddy bro tries to console me by yelling calm down, which does not help, which causes me to yell a string of obscenities at him. Later I find out he was recording the whole thing on his phone, only for the footage to get deleted by Trekkie bro's mom. So weirdly I'm feeling little to no pain during the impalement, but whenever I would move my leg I would feel excruciating pain. Naturally, I get concerned when I realize that I'm becoming tired of holding myself up on the fence. I explain that I'm slipping to Trekkie bro and Jufro bro, who try and shove a garbage bin under my to hold me up. Problem is it's too tall, so each of them end up holding one cheek of my so support my stupid self. And this is when the EMTs arrive, a whole troop of them, and the guy in charge takes one look at the situation and is like, yeah, we don't have the right equipment, someone go back and get the jaws of life. So I had to wait 10 more minutes before I could get on the ambulance, but at that point it was fine because while I don't know how much morphine they gave me I can assure you that it was enough. I calmed down and they insert a PICC line and take my vitals, but they didn't give me water even though I was thirsty AF. I remember being really mad they wouldn't give me water. Anyway, pretty soon the rest of the EMTs come back with the jaws of life, which is what they use to get people out of car wrecks, which just cuts through the metal like a knife through hot butter. I get loaded onto the ambulance and all my buddies are like, this might be the last time we see hella swella fella. Then my morphine-addled brain decides to yell out to them my catchphrase, you'll know what's up, it's Earless name, which rhymes with up the doors close, and my buddies are like, well, classic hella swella fella. After being led to the operating room by the two nicest and most calm EMTs I have ever met, I meet my mom and dad, who console me and tell me that they are going to put me under so they can pull out the fence. I notice that a lot of nurses, doctors, and med students are walking very slowly past the trauma room door, probably to try and get a glimpse at my unusual predicament. The doctors told my parents that the operation should take 2 to 3 hours, and if it takes longer something might have gone wrong. Well, something did go wrong. Here are the facts. The wrought iron fence post I was impaled upon had hollow spokes. The particular spoke that was in my leg was the home to a nest of spiders. When the trauma surgeons pulled the fence out of my leg, the spiders tried to find a warm and moist place to hide. The inside of my leg was a warm, moist place. This terrifies surprises the doctor. Apparently they flushed out my leg with 8 gallons of saline to disinfect my gaping wound and wash out the tiny arachnids, but other than the fact that I could have become Spider-Man, the operation went off without a hitch. The fence post missed all arteries, nerve cords, and bone, and because muscle heals rather quickly I was able to recover fast enough to run in the next cross-country season. 4 to 5 years later, the only souvenirs I have left from that incident are a quarter-size scar on my thigh, 1,000 new nicknames, and a piece of fence post which I will post in due time. Thanks for the ride, folks, and don't go jumping any fences. Drove to a city an hour and a half away from my small town to party with friends on a Friday night. Met a chick at a strip club, she didn't work there, went back to her place. Friends left me and drove back home. They drove back the next day to get me, but we just ended up partying again Saturday night. Woke up Saturday morning and she said she had to go to a friend's house and didn't feel comfortable leaving someone she barely knew at her house while she wasn't there. So I went with her, pulled up to her friend's house that had a chain link fence around the front yard with a couple pit bulls running around. He lets us inside and I sat in the living room while they went to the back room for a sec. Turns out he was her crack dealer and she was getting her next fix. While waiting, a black Cadillac Escalade pulls up and honks out front. Dude runs out there with something tucked under his shirt and they make some kind of exchange and he comes back in. I was still sitting on the couch kinda laughing to myself because this whole situation seemed too crazy to actually be happening in my hungover still drunk state. Definitely thought this day was going to turn out worse than it did.